Hello, chess friends, and welcome to today's broadcast on YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about some very interesting stuff that I prepared for you guys for this week's training. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about some of the most valuable concepts of Susan Polgar's DVD course. Yes, I've got some fantastic positions that we're going to practice together. And then I would like to invite you to take a look right beneath the video. There is this amazing offer for a fantastic course that you can get for an incredibly cheap price by Susan Polgar herself, being, in fact, one of the strongest women in the world, like the three Polgar sisters, known as the best woman in chess. I think her course is simply incredible. Check it out. So today I'm going to show certain examples from her courses that I find incredibly instructive. Even for me at a high level, this still works. And I mean, the level of her lectures is actually quite good for any, for any level, for any rating. But let's get to the point, and I am going to begin first with the most interesting topic, and that is tactics. Yes, we're going to start with tactics. Now, who knows what tactics is all about? Everybody knows tactics. Tactics is like, figuring out the right sequence to challenge the opponent and threaten his position. Everybody loves tactics. Who doesn't? But I want to go a little deeper. You see, something very interesting that I've always been fascinated about tactics is that tactics exist solely because of the motives in the position, like a specific weakness or a vulnerability that someone, has. And that's quite exciting because sometimes people miss those type of vulnerabilities. And I want to show you a game that was played between Shahriar Mamedyanov and Dominguez Perez. It's two big GMs. I mean, we're not talking here, just any Grandmasters. We're talking about some of the best players in the world. So that was good. That game was played, in fact, in a Blitz tournament. So yeah, I know it's not like a classical game. It was Blitz, but still, it's quite exciting. So let me show it to you. And I think you're going to find it as interesting as I did. All right, here we go. So Mamedyanov was playing with white, and his last move, I think, was a take on c6. And that was a pretty exciting move because, truth be told, this is not a pretty position for black. If you look at it more closely, you will find out that there are certain bits of problems that black has. I mean, first of all, the biggest issue, apparently, is the back rank. There is the back rank checkmate, which you could see is, well, I don't think it's pleasant. That's one. There's a back rank checkmate. And then there's, of course, the idea that if black takes with the bishop, okay, well, the e5 is going to fall and white's moving in. So question is, does white win? Does he not win? Does he do something else? What is going on? Now, let's see what you've got. Now, while I actually want to speak about the position and many topics, I do encourage every one of you to join me in the chat. So if you're watching live, it's going to be great if you can just click on the pop-up chat. It's a little bit below the video. If you look for it, you're going to find it. It's an incredible opportunity for you to join live and make it more interactive. I'm just starting, so you're not late. In any case, just ask me any questions that you may have about the course, about the training topics that we're going to be talking about today, or anything you have. Just shoot, and I promise I'm gonna answer every single question as long as it makes sense. So that's fine. Now, I got the first question. How come we don't get a notification email and a link to the webinar recently? I'm not sure. You have to send me your email if you can. I'm just going to put my email here in the chat box. Send me your email. I'll include you in the list so that you get an invite, a personal invite for next time. So this is my email, valeri.lilov@gmail.com. So getting to the point, the position, there's a weakness of the dark squares near the king. Absolutely. Very good. I think there is a weakness, and it's not just the dark square weaknesses. There is more. But, yeah, let's talk about it. So what does black get to do? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Does black lose? Does he not lose? Or what's the best move that black should make? Grandmaster Dominguez Perez is rated 2,700 and more. I mean, apparently that was a blitz game. Nevertheless, It's a pretty challenging position. And what should white do now? See, I think that, when we're looking at it, bishop takes h2 makes most sense. I mean, what should black do? Sorry, it's a language error I just made. The bishop takes h2 makes a lot of sense because it's a forcing move, taking the king on a very vulnerable position. I guess what white will have to do is to play king h1, and that looks kind of good. So black can take with the bishop, right? Well, I don't think he can, because then there's going to be the move of queen to f6, and that wouldn't be good. Now, one of you asked, okay, can we deflect the bishop so that we can bring the queen to f6? Well, here's a good example. That's definitely happening. If the bishop is out, queen is coming, and then black cannot escape. So you see, bishop takes the c6 was your suggestion, sure, but then white can actually take the e5, right? He'll take with the rook and then go up with the queen. See, Grandmaster Dominguez played bishop takes h2. Now, after king h1, he found an incredibly interesting move. He played bishop f4, and he thought that after bishop to the f4, it's just there is going to be an attack against the queen, and it's gonna force an exchange and everything. So this just looks pretty decent. I mean, nevertheless, as soon as the bishop came back there on the f4, white played queen f6, and this was the end for black, because you realize there's no way on how you can save the checkmate and defend the queen. So let's get back to the beginning of this. What was black's major mistake? Now remember that when you start analyzing a tactical position of this kind, there are a lot of I call them confusing points. The confusing points in a position like that mainly exist due to the fact that people don't know what to look at. They look at this move, they'll look at that move, just going back and forth. And this going back and forth takes a lot of time. It's not that productive, and it often leads to mistakes. So what approach would I recommend you? The approach that I would recommend, and many strong players will agree with this, is that you set a specific goal. This means you need to know particularly on what you're fighting for or what you want to achieve in the position. Now, we're not talking long-term, we're talking short-term. The sharper, the more tactical the position is, the more short-term goal we have. Presently, black has only one goal: stabilize his position. He doesn't look for a way to break through. He doesn't look for a way to find something amazing. And this is very important. All that needs to do is to find a way to stabilize. Does bishop takes h2 look to you like a stabilizing move? No, it doesn't. It looks like an attacking move. So from the very start of the position, you can actually get a pretty good idea and pretty good glimpse that this is just not right. It's not going to work as good. Okay. So what do we do? The calculation is very easy to lead. Remember, it is very, very easy to lead when you simply think of those variations or those candidates that immediately relate to the goal. Queen next to the c, bishop takes h2, those moves just don't work, or they don't pan out that well. So what we need to do is consider a different move. Bishop takes c6. Many of you suggested that move, and I think black just didn't look enough into that. This was very important. The moment that we have here bishop takes to the c6, in case white plays rook takes to e5, then you could see there is queen d6, so that white's queen cannot move into the f6 square. And suddenly after queen d6, actually there is f6 as a serious threat, so white's going to be in trouble. There's a checkmate, so white may even lose the game. Perhaps in order to avoid this, you'd have to take on the e5 with the queen. So after continuing with the move of queen takes to the e5, queen takes to the e5, rook takes to e5, it's just equal. I mean, black is a pawn up, but then there are opposite colored bishops. Yet it is white who's going to fight for a draw. It's kind of interesting to see the counter combination to white's last move, which was most likely rook takes to the c6. Black could simply go with bishop takes e6. It's not a brilliant, it's a simple stabilizing move that actually helps you to see how easy it is when you have the right direction. So tactics aren't always about finding some super secret move. Tactics are often a product, or successful tactic is a product of a good approach of the right question is asked at the right time. If you know or if you learn what these questions are, you can very easily find the move by simply following a good logic. No need of super complicated tactical sequence. In that regard, I'd like to show you another interesting example that shows what tactics are all about. This is an incredibly interesting position I like to set up, and just give me one moment. I'm going to open it up. It's a really good position, actually. Very, very instructive. Let's talk about what white's got to do here. Okay, so I haven't copied it yet. And it's going to take a second or two. Just bear with me for a moment. Now, here we go. Almost there. Now, oftentimes, I mean, not to say always, but oftentimes we get ourselves in complex positions. Positions in which there is a tactic going to happen, but we don't know where it is going to be or how it's going to be. So this is a position that was played between the Grandmaster, I think, Anna Sharovich and Eric Rosen in the Spice Cup tournament 2015. So it was white to move, and white had to decide the most precise way to go. As you can see, the position looks roughly equal. White has a chance to take the pawn on e6 or improve the knight. Now, apparently, taking the pawn on e6, as you can doubt it, it's a move that would weaken the position of white. The d2 bishop will be without protection, as well as the knight on c3, and that could become a problem. Because this is such a critical position, I've got some very important things to say about it regarding methodology, and to back up some of my claims with the previous example, I'd like you to tell me, how would you think or play this type of position? Now, before that, and while you're thinking, let me answer a few of the questions. Okay, so will you flip the board, Valeri? Okay, yeah, well, I will flip it when it's necessary to look at this from the black side. This is actually from white side to look at. Now, one of you asked, what is the best way to read a chess book and the more efficient way to read one? And most importantly, how to strike the balance between this? Well, reading in a more efficient way is one thing. Basically, when it comes down to reading a book, you have to know that this is a very good, involving process. Like, it's not like watching a video in which you just watch and you shut off your brain and you enjoy the lecture. It's like you have to move on the board. You have to try and understand what's going on. Sometimes you can pause, rethink it. It's better than watching a video. However, the problem is that it's not so clear. So there are certain things that you have to kind of answer, and there's certain puzzling questions or moves that you may not be able to comprehend. That could really ruin the overall experience. For this reason, my suggestion when you work on a chess book is to make sure that, one, you choose the theme. This means don't go for any theme. Like, say you go for a book on King's Indian, but you never play King's Indian. That will make no sense. You have to be very selective. So pretty much pick one book that brings the topics you really look at. The second important thing that I can suggest about reading a book is never to try and just go through the book and the examples. Most people do that. Try to guess the moves. I've always accepted reading to be one thing and exercising and reading to be a completely different experience, much slower and yet a lot more efficient. So whenever I get a book and I want to be able to practice or train with it, what I do is that I take the book and then I put the example on a physical board. I never read, or I never suggest that you read a book without a physical board. You have to have a physical board, unless it's like Garry Kasparov's book on how life imitates chess, which has one or two examples at most. It's more like a philosophical book, which you can read at any point. If it's a chess book, you have to have a physical board, chess board with a book. If you only have a book without a chess board, it's not good. It has to be some tactical puzzles, perhaps. Otherwise, book on strategy or something. You got to be a very good blindfold chess player. So you need to be able to visualize the board incredibly well to go through a game blindfold. In any case, try to guess the move. Ask yourself, what would I do if I was in a master's shoes? This method is being used by all the great players, and it works. Every time when I've studied a book on positional chess or strategy, that's what I've been doing. I pause, I ask myself, what would I do? I likely wouldn't guess the move, but the process itself is what's really powerful. Okay, so computer board, physical is much better. So do that. Do we play with black? No, it's white to move in this position. Let's get back to the board. So what to do now? Now, let's see. Does anybody have a suggestion what white should do? Knight g2, knight f3. Let's get back to these moves. Knight f3, good thing. But really, where is this going to lead you to? I mean, truth be told, I think that he's got some quite nice moves. In case we play with knight f3, black can even do e5, in my opinion. If we choose to take or maybe not e5. I mean, I don't know, like maybe king h8. Why does he have to do that? We can't take the pawn. Apparently, because if we do, he's going to just take on f3. And then after f3 take, queen takes b6, and now rook d3. I think black has taken over the initiative. He's going to be creating a threat to take 2 minor pieces for a rook in case he takes in the c3 and, 2 times. If we retreat, that's going to be even worse because he can move his other rook. I mean, sure, we took a pawn. Who cares, really? That's not good. Now, all right, so this doesn't look good. It creates another target. Now, you may be thinking, Valeri, wouldn't white just jump in with his knight on the g5? Can he just do that? Well, I guess he could, but really, where is this knight going to get you? He'll just try to drive with h6, and then if we take the e6, he will likely have rook e8, which is another bit of a problem. We can't escape or drive away all the pieces. Nope. Knight f3 is a decent move, but it's not the very best. We can play knight c2. Knight c2 is not bad too, but then, again, what would it really do? Maybe black can now even play e5, I'm thinking. e5 would be actually pretty good. The knight doesn't have any prospects. Now, think a little more while I actually play knight c2 and knight e3. Where is the knight going from there? You see, you need to have a purpose, usually attacking. No. While you're thinking again, I'd like to answer one of your questions. You said, I'm not able to understand the Grandmaster Manifesto. Can you tell me how to improve using it? The Grandmaster Manifesto is a series of very instructive lectures taught by Grandmasters. When you're studying videos, as I mentioned to you, the general problem is involvement. It's like, in many occasions, you'll sit, probably just, like eat something and watch the video, which is really not as efficient. The only way for you to make most out of it is basically to ask yourself questions all the time. Like, why is this guy playing that? Or what would have happened in this situation? Oftentimes that will require you to pause the video or maybe even have a chessboard with you and next to you with the actual position from the video. Because a lot of the videos don't move so quickly, so the master can explain, you'll be able to follow it perfectly well with the chessboard next to you. So you can play through the positions and then go back to the original one. Ask yourself questions like, how would I be playing? Take some notes. Put some explanations of your own into, in addition to these notes. That's something you have to do. You see? And of course, most importantly, try to exercise on the themes, not just to go through them, but just next to that, think about playing a game, 15, 20-minute rapid game, or even longer, where you apply that knowledge. Anyway, getting back to this, white played knight d3. Was that a good move? Not really. Black took the knight. And then after queen takes to the d3, there was, in fact, knight e5 that was going to happen. Queen e2, check, and check. White saw that, so she actually took on the e6, but shortly after she resigned. Now, when you're looking at this position, you're going to say, Valeri, that was just a tactic that white missed. It didn't have to happen like that, right? It's just it was just a blunder. And that's what most chess players will actually come up with. Now, remember this. Becoming a victim of a tactic or being able to do a tactic and yet missing one isn't necessarily because we didn't see something. I mean, there is a certain percentage of that. But oftentimes the reason lies within our bad approach. So going back to the previous position where I mentioned that seeing tactics is a matter of approach, I like to tell you this. When you go into position like that, it's extremely easy to find more than 80% of the good moves if you focus on the forcing moves. No matter what you do, forcing moves are always the best for each side because there is action, reaction. Action, reaction. Forcing move causes a reaction. A reinforcing move gives freedom. The more freedom you give to your opponent, the more possibilities he has that you may not calculate or you could miss. So that's why forcing moves are the highest priority. Restrictive moves are the second, and then some reinforcing moves to back them up in case there's nothing else. White had to just do queen takes d6. Despite the fact that it may look risky, the concept of forcing moves should have provided White with a pretty good idea that a move like bishop g5 to follow it up with could actually be pretty useful. Don't know if that would be winning, but in case of rook takes d1, knight takes d1, and I mean, okay, black couldn't take on the c3 if you were thinking about that, mainly due to the, okay, if he takes on the c3, white would just play bishop takes f6. So you could see that the rook on c3 and the one on d1 are being attacked. And then, I mean, if black takes d1, white would do c3, so you'd be a pawn up. Or if he takes on the g, if he takes the g takes f, there's queen takes f6. Forcing move may not look good, but in fact, it's forcing the opponent to defend. Now, black would have to exchange. That's the reaction. And then after rook e8, we have queen to f5. It's creating pressure against the opponent, virtually creating tension. When you do that, you gain something. You get certain benefits. Even if at a certain point you lose that bit of initiative, you will be able to stay more active and confront him because his possibilities, in a way, will be diminished. That's the idea. Forcing moves are the highest priority. And then if you think about them when you calculate, your tactics ability will really improve. Your calculations are going to be much more precise. That's about it. Could we play f3? Well, that's actually talking about what I just mentioned. Knight g2, f3, all those moves, they just don't work as well. All right, here we go. So this is basically a good example to see what you should and you shouldn't have in mind. Now let's talk a little bit about something else. What about strategy? Oh, yeah. You know, I've often been kind of amazed that so many people don't even know what strategy is. I mean, they see these positional books that explain strategy, and, you know, they don't get much out of it. And I agree. A lot of the strategic books just give concepts that don't really get well explained. How do these concepts work? And what can we learn from them? Or how can we learn to implement them in the games? That's where a lot of people struggle. So I want to bring up a classic example. This was a game played between the White Magic. This is the nickname of Akiba Rubinstein, I think. And he was one of the greatest chess players in the 20th century. And his opponent was named Walter von Holzhausen. I'm not sure if I pronounced that name well. But anyway, this is an incredible example, and I want to show you and I want to share with you my opinion on this game. So let's go, guys. Let's take a look at this. All right. Now, what is this position all about? Now, before I get into that, yeah, the White Magic, he was able to win positions that nobody could win. Everybody was saying his draw, so Rubinstein was able to win them. It's not one of them. It's still the early stage of the game. But I want to hear what you guys have to say about this position and White's best possibility. Now, while you're doing that, I wanted to recommend you this fantastic course by Susan Polgar University that's being offered at an incredible discount. It includes all the necessary themes and topics with more than, I don't know, like I think it was more than 200 hours of chess training. You can take a look at the link below, and I just put it in the chat as well. Check it out, and I mean, this is a great value and a fantastic course to learn from. Now, I just got a first suggestion. What about bishop d2? You know what? It's not a bad move. Question is, what does it really give us in the long run? Truth be told, nothing. You know, when it comes down to strategy, as opposed to tactics, instead of having an immediate, like, payoff, strategy requires a follow-up. Like, and I mean a really good follow-up, a really good continuation, and, you know, a way to see how that works. In tactics, we could say everything is just like short run. You see it and you say, okay, it's clear. But in strategy, you have to think more long term. Imagine it's like an action movie. If you have an action movie, what you see is like an immediate battle. Somebody, kicks the other guy, and then there is, something very quick, very short term, and you understand it. But then we have these other very, tricky and smart crime movies, let's say, or whatever. You actually have to think a lot. Sometimes you have to put these things in your mind and think in the longer run. And since I'm a great movie fan, I really appreciate those a lot more because there's a lot more depth to it. There's a lot more, like smart plot, so to speak. So the point behind it is we want to think long run. When it comes to tactics, everything's simple. When it comes to strategy, things look simple, but it's not that simple. People get confused that simple rules can help. Maybe they could, but I'm going to teach you right now what I believe are the key questions you got to ask yourself when it comes to strategy and how to make it better. First, you got to identify if it's really about strategy or it's about tactics. Some positions are about strategy, some positions are about tactics. You can very easily see that. You can feel it. I mean, if you believe the game can be won in 1 or 2 moves, it's apparently a tactical game. If you have a position that's more like, okay, a lot of things are going to happen and it doesn't feel like they're going to change the position too big, then we've got a much more of a strategical game. Now, once you identify that, you have to start with the question, how can I restrict my opponent? Now, we're not talking about forcing moves. No, don't get confused. Restricting in a strategic position often requires either that you get to push the opponent's pieces away and make them less significant, but not like with bishop d2, which you would rather easily respond, I believe, with queen b6 or something, which would be good. I mean, I'm not, or maybe not queen to b6. Queen b6 may be bad. I guess maybe he would just play e5. He actually doesn't even have to retreat. You're not threatening anything there. e5, I think if we jump in, maybe our knights are going to hang. So this really doesn't bring anything. See, we want to think about a way to restrict by challenging him away. Knight d3 also wouldn't work because we'll force our important knight to go back. And then what we'd like to do is think of a way to restrict him naturally. The natural restriction is a concept I've mentioned many times, and it basically means an opportunity for us to bring our pieces on much more powerful squares, where basically they can set a challenge and they can threaten the opponent. Now, that's exactly what we do with g3. Now, while you're actually taking your time to comprehend that move, I'd like to answer a couple questions. How do I analyze a position to evaluate and make a plan? These three things are apparently what makes strategy successful, so I'm going to be talking about that. Just bear with me. Now, what is a hidden development? What about queen e4 trading black's only developed piece? That is not a good idea. If you trade, you'll lose opportunities. Remember that we haven't got anything immediate yet. We don't have a quick way to prove our advantage. Our pieces are needed for that long-term pressure we're intending to create against our opponent. If you tend to exchange, you're going to lose that. Don't do it. You need the pieces, you need the pressure until that moment where you can convert it. Okay? Was a4 a good move? Sure, but I mean, in that case, black would have just played e5, so there's not too much going. What white wanted to do was to make the move of pawn to g3. In that way, when the white bishop goes to g2, there's going to be a nice challenge instantly against the opponent's b7 pawn. We wouldn't be giving him that much free time to develop, and it's an essential move to help us out. e5, knight jumped back to b3 to attack, queen to b4, and white played bishop to g2. So white's doing pretty well, I gotta say. Yeah, why not? Just let's set the bishop in. Black played knight f6, and this was the time where white figured out it would be nice to restrict the queen more completely. See, now if black played queen d6, we wouldn't have just stopped right there. White would have queen takes to the d6 available, knight a5 as a strong opportunity, excuse me, and then there's bishop to the e3. So you could see these restrictions what we created are going to even lead to an attack later on. So black couldn't just go back the easy way. He had to move this way Let me promote the line. So white plays bishop e3, and now black plays queen c7. So much limitations. Black had to spend like 3 to 4 tempi to really go back, and that just does not work so well. So what do we do next? Okay, so the position's really good. I got to say that. It feels good, and I think the moment we realize how well white's pieces are developed, subconsciously you're already thinking a bit more about, well, if we got this development, then we've got to have something more. And you know what? You will be right to think like that. You'll be right. Because indeed, white must have something that will help him and give him a chance in this case. Hmm. You know, it's kind of important because there's just so many nice moves that you can do, and most of them don't work. See? What you got to do is to constantly keep your opponent a bit backward. Rook c1 looks fine. It's a good move, you know? It's just going to set up your rook pretty. But then after you do this, black would likely do knight c6. He'll block, and that's about right. Knight a4, bishop f5, nothing's going to happen. It's you know, even if casting. So what white chose to do, what Rubinstein picked up to do, is pretty awesome. It was knight e4 directly. Now this move not only creates the threat of knight b6, but it's a quick version of holding the opponent back. In fact, it kind of translates to the same line of rook c1, I can see. And he did it. Was this made so that we can begin an early attack against black? No. It was made because of restriction. The long-term goal for white was to create a weakness against black's position. And we may not necessarily see what weakness it will be, but we know that with so much activity and domination of our pieces, definitely something is going to happen, like bishop e7, knight a5. And that was pretty good. So black jumps in. He played knight g4, hoping to attack the bishop and get on with his attack. So what is white supposed to do? A lot of moves are possible, but keep in mind, I just want you to think about the most active moves that will help you create some more pressure. What should white do now? Take your time. Just think carefully. And where to go now? Where to go? Knight d5. This is what we need to do. Knight d5, absolutely. See, it's important because every move has to keep the opponent on the backside. That's what Polgar is essentially trying to explain, I think, in many of her lectures. I do recommend you checking out her course because she explained it so well that I personally find it very instructive to just watch and really get to see the concept shown with some very beautiful examples. All these examples were from her DVDs right now, by the way, and she's explaining them much better than I do. So I do recommend you to take a look. It's a fantastic course. The full Polgar Chess University is over, I think, over 300 lessons and 130 hours. I could see that was it's fantastic, and it covers everything starting from a beginner to, like, in terms of the art of attack, secrets of chess strategy, secrets of chess tactics. Then we have the intermediate part of tactics and strategy, and we have the advanced part. So essentially you can feel like you're progressing from one level to another as you get to study her whole course. Check out the link below that video or the chat link I just posted. In any case, this is just a good example to see how white leads up the attack. We have knight d5 forcing the black queen to move out, and then white just sets up the bishop on b6, which is just beautiful. Bishop to d6, and presently white has to decide. Okay, so there was a way to castle, or there was a way to play knight c5 or h3 even. What I want you to do is to give me your best guess. What do you think should be white's best idea in this position? Mhm. Take a second. Don't hurry. Just think a little bit about this yourself. Position, everything is clear. And I'd like to point out now that there is no easy way to say, okay, oh, let's do that. This is a great move. Don't think like that. I think white is doing fantastic, and black is definitely under pressure. There is no doubt or a second guess about that. It's a beautiful position in that regard. But but the fact it is a beautiful position does not mean that we have an easy way to play it. We have to figure a way, the most effective. Knight c5 or bishop h3. I like these moves. Let's comment about them. Bishop h3 is nice, but then black's just going to do f5. So there's not really a whole lot. Now remember, you need a follow-up. There's no direct payoff. You need a follow-up. The follow-up here could be bishop takes g4, but truth be told, that leads to nothing. We've just lost our strong bishop for a knight that really didn't even matter. Now, in the game, Rubinstein played short castle. He didn't really want any complications, although the better move would have been knight c5. Playing a move like that would have guaranteed us a strong advantage, so in case he exchanges and then we retake, the black king is cut off and he can't castle. That was a very valuable move, by the way. When Rubinstein chose to castle short, he gave black a little time so he can get out. It's not to say that castling is bad, but if you're given an opportunity to go after your opponent, create different type of threats, you do that. And then there will be enough time for reinforcing. That's why we actually can say that there is a ladder of moves that we got to follow. First is the forcing moves, checks, captures, direct threats, moves that just constantly hold the opponent on the backside. Then we've got the restrictive moves, which limit him, like the moves with which you push his pieces away, or you advance and activate your own pieces so they take away possibilities. And then there we have the reinforcing moves, just natural, quiet moves that basically help us to reinforce the position and get more pieces into play. The move that white chose with short castles and its follow-up of queen d2 were these reinforcing moves, which, although they were not that bad, simply didn't feel that it was so strong. They didn't feel like they were causing that much tension against black. So black played queen e6. And what would you guys do right now? Tell me about it. White has a pretty good position. Most of his pieces are fair. So where to go next? Keep in mind, the pieces are good. The limitation against black is there. White just needs to figure out a way to make it work. So what does white do now? And the more I think of that type of move position, the more it seems to me like white is brilliant. I mean, seriously, what's not to like about it? A strong knight, good bishop, solid pieces, everything is good. But that doesn't answer the question, and the question I think is more important than even the answer. How do we get from this position to a winning advantage? Now, everybody's wondering that. Knight c5 sounds like the right idea, but white didn't want to do it. See, if we did knight c5 now, black would have just exchanged and do rook d8. Keep the tension. You see, if you see a forcing move that will help your position grow and make it much better, you do it. But if we don't, it's just going to be a lost bullet. What we need to do is keep our ammo, keep our strength, keep our resources for a little bit later. For now, we just like to hold them in this position. And now white played knight c5 on the very next move. Does it make a difference? Absolutely. The rook on d1 adds even more problems. And now in case black exchanges, takes, you can realize that a move of rook d8 is just not possible due to the check on a7. And queen takes d8 being played out next. So the rook is going to come forward and destroy. So the real idea is white didn't want to hurry. Now let's talk about the issue of speed, because some people have a problem with that. Now, I've got this question many, many times. Valerie, can you tell me when do I have to hurry and when can I slow down? And the answer is always one. It all depends on the position, but most of all, it depends on whether your opponent can do something. If he can do something, then you don't have to slow down. You can go on, you can try to limit that or make threats on your own. But if you've given the time, this means you're given that window where he has no counterplay or nothing special that he can do. Use that to reinforce your position. So when the actions start, when you have to begin, when you're forced to begin, you will have what it takes to back up your play. And that's exactly what white did with the move of rook to d1. Black plays e4 and knight c5. Bishop takes the c5, bishop takes the c5. And then black was kind of frustrated. I mean, seriously. In case of rook d8, we saw knight e7. In case of rook e8, I'd say that white has knight c7. So that's not a position which was really worth looking at. Black plays queen f5 now. And now we have a very critical position, very important situation. Everything looks good. I want you to think carefully and try to figure it out. What is white supposed to do now? I mean, given the current space, the possibilities and everything, what do we do now? Now, I want you to be very precise because, you know, a lot of the white pieces are playing a fantastic role, and yet h3. Is h3 a good move? Almost. You see, white did it with the other pawn, f3. The reason why he played it with f3, not with h3, is because there was a chance. If you keep the motive of that pawn being challenged, there may be different ways for black to exploit it, even including e3. And then we can see that if white takes with the bishop, protecting the pawn, and f2, black might just get to play with knight takes to the e3, queen takes to the e3, and who knows? I just think that white's lost his bishop, so I don't think that is worth the pawn. f3 keeps everything together. In case black exchanged, now you can understand that there is the f8 rook that's hanging, so we don't have to give away the bishop. And that was it. So black pushed the pawn, white took it, takes, and black just gives it up. Like he cannot move the rook on d8 as it will be taken, and we have a checkmate. And when you play with bishop e6, take on f8, take on f8, queen to b6, queen e5, e4, and as black pushed up with f5, there was f4, queen b8, e5, and it was game over. It's pretty much done. But what was really interesting is we started winning this position, not by a big tactic, but by a small move, restrictive move. The long-term efficiency of our moves outweighs the short-term challenges we can create against our opponent when it comes down to strategy more than tactics. Now, I understand that sometimes strategy and tactics actually get interconnected. And sometimes you have to go fast, sometimes you have to go slow. It depends on the position. But in most times, you can very clearly distinguish what kind of position this is, so you can give itself more priority to the one or the other approach. So that's what we do with the G3. Very interesting way of Rubinstein and how he developed. He took the opportunity to restrict the opponent, and then he took the liberty of just completing the development, knowing that black can't get out. And he has to stay pressured and being challenged at all times. I think it was really well played. So now what I want to show you is another very instructive example, because this is clear, but you're probably thinking, okay, Valeri, I know what I do or what I should do when I'm dominating, but show me a situation where I don't dominate. Show me a position where my opponent just pushes me and makes me worry and feel like I'm losing. What do we do then? You know what? That's really painful. I mean, whenever we speak of such a situation, you have to know it is not going to feel good. It is never going to feel that good. So I'm going to bring up a very instructive example that was played by Polgar herself, Susan Polgar herself, versus Grandmaster Almira Skripchenko in the Calvia tournament 2004. This is a perfect example of how we can evaluate the strength of the opponent's threats. So check this out. I think that you're going to learn a lot. By the way, this and many of her other games, as well as many other Grandmaster games, you can find out in this fantastic 300 lectures course that's being offered for an incredibly cheap price on the link below. I'm going to copy the link on the chat so that you can actually see it. It's a fantastic deal. Do check it out because I think that you can learn a lot. It's really, really good, and I'm telling you guys because I think the way the teachings. Her teachings are incredibly good. So I'm just going to bring it on the chat right now. This is the link. Check it out. 300 hours for an incredibly cheap price. It's almost nothing for that type of quality. Anyway, this is a position where basically we're going to flip the board so that we can look at black's pieces. I mean, black's not good. Let's face it. A lot of the pieces are bad, and back. Yeah, well, the queen is the only advance on the rook, probably. But we see the rook can't take, more or less, because if it takes b2, like this, white can do knight d5. Even the queen just stays a little like a statue out there. So there's not a whole lot. Okay, so in that specific case, white was to move, and she played rook g3. So there comes my first question to you guys. What do you do? We have a lot to worry about, and essentially we have the g7, the king on the g8 that's badly placed. We have a lot of pieces on the back side defending. So the question being is, what will be the best way to defend? Take your time, guys, and think about it. What do you think black has to do right now? What's the best approach and the right candidate to follow it through? Let's think about this and analyze. Neutralize the bishop with bishop f6. Initial suggestion. I don't mind that. In fact, I kind of like this. If we play bishop f6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and, white can try to play a move of pawn up to the b3. I like this. This would have been good. But then think about this. Next move, white will do rook d3. He'll threaten on d6, most likely double or even triple there. And then we've got a huge problem. Most of our pieces are going to be fairly bad and behind. And this just isn't good. I mean, you see it for yourself. Everything that black will do is likely going to be very challenged. And so, okay. And, you see, the real deal here is to try something else. What else we can do? Like, what do we do instead of that bishop f6? Now, g6 is what you're actually saying. In fact, I like the move of pawn up to g6 because then it means a lot. We can just protect everything. We have a nice shot. But then again, white is just controlling a lot of squares, and I think it's still interesting, but the diagonal and everything will weaken. No. See, Polgar had a different idea. Her approach was interesting. It was basically about stabilizing first. Now, when you're defending, there's a very hard part that many people don't get. It's called stabilizing. Stabilizing basically means making sure you don't let your opponent to convert his advantage into something big quickly. It's actually not that easy to do this, but it's very important. It pretty much suggests you have to play ugly in order to stay alive. This means you have to get back, you have to find a shelter, and you have to hide like a dog. No, I mean, this is more like I'm overplaying it right now, but pretty much that's how it is. Imagine you're in a battle, you get hurt, you want to go back there and just show the other guy, but you're hurt. If you do that, that's going to be your demise. So what you do is you find some shelter, some square that nobody can find you. You play dead until your guys find you. Then you go heal, and then you get back in the battle. That's how it works, and that's how it's supposed to be done. Otherwise, you be brave, but you die brave. And our suggestion here is the same thing. If you're going to defend successfully, you got to go with the ugly moves. You got to figure out where the opponent can attack. You got to make your bishop a pawn. You got to do a lot more bad things. But you know what? That's going to keep you alive. So you're going to get through this situation so you get to the next one. It's a very simple concept of defending, stabilizing. So whenever you get attacked or challenged by your opponent, go with that question first. Ask yourself, how do I find a way to stabilize my position? All right. I think white should have played b3 to stabilize her own, but she did queen h5 going on for this quick type of attack. And that's something that now we use to counter. Rook takes b2. Rook h3, h6, and rook g3. Well, I guess that king is in a severe trouble with the rook, queen, and many other pieces coming along. So what do we do now? How to play here. Now think about that. We got a problem with the g7. We have the king on g8. And now I know what you're actually thinking. King h8 would be nice, right? Yes. But I want to give you a very simple concept. Now think about this. The defense is only as good as the opponent's best attacking moves. This is similar to what I've said before about attacking. An attack is only as good as the opponent's defensive moves. And I want you to get that. I'm not talking about, just, general stuff. I'm talking about moves that look pretty good, both for attacking and defending, and people play them and they lose with them because they don't think so much about what the opponent will respond. And the opponent's response is everything, especially when you're defending. Your opponent's response really shows whether your defense is going to be working or it's not. King h8 just loses due to bishop e3. We got a real situation, in my opinion, due to bishop takes h6, and it doesn't work. So I want you to be precise. The opponent's best attacking move is the key to finding your best defense. So before you even look for a good defense, find out what he's threatening and what he will respond in case you do whatever move you have or you figure it out. This is what we do. What Polgar did was something excellent. Queen f7 doesn't work too well because white will just take on h6, I suppose, and it will be too passive. What we would prefer is to play rook f7. Now, to one of you who said the video is not clear and the feed stops, try to increase the quality, I think, for better quality, and lower down the quality in case it stops. It's probably from internet connection. It's definitely not me. It's YouTube. So rook f7. Now you're probably wondering, okay, Valeri, what are you talking about? Remember, we're not talking about stopping the attack. Can you stop a fire? Well, yes. I mean, if you put water on it. But can you stop an attack by basically just saying, stop, I will shut it down? No, you can't. So it's important to know the attack is going to go no matter what you do. Stopping your opponent's attack is a very long process and a painful one. So now we've stabilized. What's the second step? Now, the important step you have to understand is you have to fight the opponent's pieces. What's giving him this constant attack isn't so much your weak position. Your position wouldn't be weak if your opponent didn't have the strong pieces to keep the tension on. If you can fight those pieces one by one after you've stabilized, then you have found the way to neutralize a source of power. And that's how we do it. So we first stabilize our position, we prevent any immediate damage, we figure out his best attacking moves to create big threats. And then after that, we find out the source of power he has, and we push them away. That's what black wanted. Now, in case white plays with bishop e3, we go with what we call as a counterattack. Counterattack is really special. We can have a move like queen e5 coming in, and then you realize that after bishop to f4, we counterattack by taking c3, now deflecting the rook, and his queen's hanging. Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, truth be told, after queen e5, there isn't too much that white can do. I mean, even in case of this, there's queen takes g3. So that's going to be bad. And white couldn't do it. She had to do bishop f2 to get the bishop right back, and this was the time when black did rook takes c2. Come on, isn't black afraid that white can just jump in? Not really. We've pushed away the bishop. The queen and the rook can't do anything but just kind of protect each other, and there's no damaging threat the opponent can create, so you can be safe. I also want to talk about one more thing. When you're defending, the actual attack of your opponent is going to scare the hell out of you. And I mean, really, it looks scary and it's going to make you panic almost. In order for that not to happen, and you're probably thinking I'm going to tell you something like, just don't get scared. Nothing is so bad. You can do it. You can defend. But there's no point in general suggestions like that. I'm going to give you something else, something more practical. I call it the risk factor. Now, that is being suggested in some books, although there are not too many. The risk factor is pretty much one concept, and it means it actually reads, when you see the opponent attacking you, the only time when you have to be really scared or think about his threats as something huge is when there is a chance for him to damage your position. Everything else is prospects. Does it mean you shouldn't worry about prospects? No, you should worry about them just as much as anything else. But that doesn't mean that you should get scared, go back, go passive, and defend just because he has a prospect of creating a threat that can attack you, and eventually that attack can kill you. That's a lot of ifs. That may never happen. So I want you to understand that the risk factor is something you have to consider at any point when you're defending. This means look at your opponent's pieces, look at his current play, and ask yourself the question, how can he damage my position? If you don't see a concrete way how he can do that now or in a few moves' time, if you don't see a realistic possibility, think about that as an opportunity. You're being given the time to make the right moves to stabilize your position, push away his pieces, or even counterattack him like black does right now, simply because there's no risk, or the risk is very small. That's how you find out the right strategy. Consider the risk factor. If there is a big risk, well, be more careful. But if there is not too much risk, obviously you can focus on your possibilities to reinforce the position, to consolidate, as I call it. Now with queen e5, it's a lot, and then we can realize white's actually the one who loses. If rook b1, there is queen takes g3 again. Black is going to win the queen. And well, white played rook c1, but then black still does rook takes f2 in this position, which was pretty awesome. And then we can see there's a real trouble. White does rook c to c3. I mean, if he takes here, we have queen takes g3 and the take on h6. So after that, white played rook c to c3. There's queen d4 coming. And white stands beautifully. There's no doubt about that. He stands great. But what does he do? What does he do? You see how right I am? No, I mean, I don't want to brag about it. But this is just a fundamental concept. Is there a risk or is there not? The way you feel suggests that there is a problem, but it doesn't say whether this is a problem worth scaring about and being, passive about. Okay? If you see a direct damage, you be scared, you do the moves to protect it no matter what. But if there is no danger, if there's just your opponent just hovering his speeds and trying to make you scared, to intimidate you, don't do that. Don't get intimidated. Don't make yourself passive just because of the probability for a possibility, for a chance that he may sometimes at some point attack you and make you lose. That is a lot of ifs again. And now I think black was just confident enough that there's not a thing in the world that can happen. There's a check. In fact, he was leading up his attack, and that was a lot more significant than what white did out there in the last few moves, just because white didn't actually do anything. And if we think about it, we're doing something. We got that take, and we got that take, and we got that take. You see? That's a lot better, something a lot more real out there. In any case, this just shows you the different questions you got to be thinking and you got to be asking yourself, like, how do I protect my position against these major threats? When you have to be intimidated and not by his attack, or whether you have to be at all. And how do we deal with it, with his threats? So f6 was a very good way on how black did it. Then he countered. He kept stabilizing. It's a long process, as I mentioned to you, and you have to keep in mind his best attackers, his strong moves to continue and have a good follow-up. It was just not possible. So I do hope that you guys liked it. It's very good examples. And again, you can find them all in the whole course by Susan Polgar. That's like more than 300 lectures at an incredibly cheap price. You're not going to get that kind of offer. It's 50% off. So you can check it out. It's going to be available only for the next like a few hours. And I would recommend you to go get it, start studying, and whatever level you're at, whether you're at the beginner, advanced, or intermediate level, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of interesting concepts that you can study and start implementing in your games. Now, one of you just asked, will you be covering the Smyslov technique like that in the description? Yeah, well, I mean, certain things are being changed from the description, so because obviously that's a lot of content I wanted to cover. Definitely, I'll be covering a lot of this and more in upcoming lectures. I make a lot of these in strategy, so just stay tuned. It's going to be next Saturday at the same time. Again, don't forget to check up the Polgar course. And for anyone who wants to send me games that I can review or questions that you have on your chest or whatever, you can do it through my website, which is tigerlilov.com. I welcome you to send me anything you want. I'll review it, and I'll give you my feedback. Thank you all, and I wish you a really good Saturday. I'll speak to you next week.